Okay, all right, so we're just about 3:30. I think what we'll do is we'll get started now, and then as we go through, I think we'll probably have a few more people dial in. We've got about 30 or 40 people registered for today, so we can't wait for everybody. But what we've got is we've got Lauren who's producing at the moment, and she'll be admitting people as we go through. I'll just switch so people can see my green screen cutout. So hi everybody, thank you all for joining. My name's Sam Spencer. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Aristotle Metadata. Many of you have probably come along to one of these sessions in the past, and we're running one of our traditional kind of feedback sessions. So we're not doing big grand sales things today. I think we've all seen a lot of those recently. I think what we're talking about is really big things from the roadmap. So if you're an existing Aristotle client, there's a lot to get excited about today. I'm kind of excited about what we're showing off today, to be honest. And we'll be running through basically some new features that we'll be deploying to Aristotle clients or have already deployed to Aristotle clients over the coming weeks, and then talk a little bit about like some challenges with data and go on to some Q&A at the end. So we're not going to run through everything in the product if you're new to Aristotle, but there'll be a lot of time for Q&A at the end. Without further ado, what I'll do is I'll bring up the agenda and we'll talk through about what we're going to be looking at today. So there we go. So today's agenda, we're going to be looking at a fictional company. We've actually set up a new staging environment for this. We had to pick a name and we had to pick a domain. So we've gone with Ninja Widgets. So we'll be talking about this new fictional company that we're going to be looking at some case studies from. We'll be looking at just kind of a background of data lineage and why it's important. And then we'll be going through some features from the roadmap, and I'll bring up the roadmap and we'll have a quick background on that for everybody who hasn't seen it. We'll go through a handful of new features for Aristotle and then go into some Q&A if anybody has any questions about where to go to from there. But what we're going to start with is I'm going to remove my face now. Let's get rid of that. You're not missing out very much. So we'll remove that and we'll go, what is Ninja Widgets? So Ninja Widgets is a fictional company that we're starting to do with a couple of our demos because I think everybody has their own internal data. They don't want us using those as case studies. So Ninja Widgets is our exemplary of an organization who has a lot of complex data systems. They're on the journey of data governance. They want to change. They want to improve and be doing things better, but they've got a lot of questions that they're asking along the way. So they're a manufacturer of widgets. They're producing a lot of data. It's held in a number of different areas. They've got challenges with understanding it because it's managed by different groups, and they want to track their data better, right? So I think in this case study, there's a lot of things that everybody can pull out of it. So there's a lot of things that you can kind of look at in your own organizations and say, how are we producing our data? Where's our data coming from? What does it mean? Where is it going? And are we tracking it as well as it could be? So using that as a background, we're going to look at a couple of features today. As I said, so we're going to be looking at a collections refresh, so a little bit of they call it taxonomy refresh, like how are people managing their data? How are they collecting things together? We're going to be looking at some additional metadata management that we've got through the platform, some data lineage examples, and then we're going to jump onto some geospatial examples as well. But to get us all in the right place, I just want to have a quick look at this data at Ninja Widgets and where it's coming from and where it's going to, how it's being managed, and what is it, right? So the case study that we're talking about today is we've got our executive kind of systems that need to be managed. We've got monthly dashboards that are gathering data from across the organization, right? So we've got manufacturing data, we've got sales data, we've got payments data, we've got HR data, all needing to be fed into a dashboard, right? I'm gonna start some interactivity here. I know people can't chime in, but throw me a thumbs up if this sounds like a challenge that you guys are facing, where you've got this problem of disparate data sources across the organization and not knowing where it's coming from, not being able to get that high-level view, high-level mapping. Can I get a couple of thumbs up? Is this a challenge that people are seeing? Here we go, one person. Two, a couple of people. So it's a challenge, right? We've got this challenge, and traditionally we've had this problem where we're able to produce these graphics, but it's been the domain of traditional data modelers, It's been outside of the boundaries of like, your day-to-day person who just needs to document the spreadsheet that they produced and move on, right? So that's the challenge that we're looking at today. Like, how do we take this data that we're capturing in Aristotle? How do we document our data and do it in a way that we can actually make sense of it, so that when we start trying to understand how data is being used across the organization, we get a view actually a little bit like this, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop my slides, and we're just going to jump. The rest of this is basically, we're not going to go for the full hour unless there's lots of Q&A, but we're going to jump into a lot of live demos on our staging environment. So I'm just going to stop presenting, and you can look at me, look at my screens, and try and figure out where I'm going. So, and I'm going to share. So I'm just going to quickly share the roadmap. So are we all back? Yeah, cool. Okay. I'll assume, Lauren, we're all good. We can hear. Fantastic. We can hear and we can see. So what we're going to be talking about today, just quickly, is stuff from the roadmap. So if you weren't able to attend the meeting probably a month and a half ago now, a month and a half ago, we started developing, or we published our roadmap for the rest of the year. If you go to aristotlemetadata.com and just search for 2022 roadmap, you'll find it there. You'll be able to bring it up. We talk through like a lot of the high level content, and again, this quarter is really focusing on that data lineage problem. And you can see the roadmap in depth. So we're talking today about data lineage. We're talking about geospatial data management, and we're talking about this summary statistics, which I'll show you. I think they're three pretty cool new things that we've added. I think a lot of people are going to get value out of them when we start looking at data sharing in 1 or 2 sessions time. But that's my promo bit kind of done. What I'm going to jump into is our live example. So we've got our Aristotle Metadata registry set up here, and we've started adding in Ninja Widgets manufacturing organization, and we've started collecting a little bit of data about this organization. So the first thing that I want to show off is just that taxonomy thing that we were talking about earlier. So one of the biggest challenges with data and with Aristotle has been finding all this content. We're adding data sources, we're documenting it, we're adding data definitions, business glossaries. It's kind of hard to manage, right? It starts to get overwhelming. And for a while, we've had this idea of collection. So different organizations can manage collections of metadata to help make it a little bit more discoverable. And we've actually gone through a process over the last couple of months. We've done a little bit of a refresh on this. So if you're already using Aristotle, this is probably going to be really useful to see. It's not a huge update, but I think it's a really good quality of life update. And it actually starts to make this information a little bit more accessible. So previously, a lot of this has been collapsible and page refreshes. So our team's rewritten the front end for the collection. So it's all JavaScripty, and it kind of, very dynamic, really live updated kind of stuff. And it's also giving visual indications of what's in content. So we can see whether or not content's nested, whether there are sub collections in there. I'm going to jump into my sales dashboards collection, and you can see this information's been made public. And I've got 2 data sets in there. So I'm getting my collection together. One thing that's been a problem in the past is, and this is really speaking to our existing Aristotle users, is getting these collections built up so that people can tag them. We've actually done a little bit of a change, and I'll show you 2 parts to that individually. But first of all, we've added this capability to allow people across the organization to tag these collections. So previously, it was a case where every owner of these collections had to find everything to go in, which is useful in some cases. But people are saying, that's great, but when I want other people to tag it and throw it into this collection so everybody else can find it, it wasn't easy. So what we've added now is we've added this permissions control. It still defaults to the original, where if you're the owner of a collection, only you can drop things in it. But now you can actually make it so that anyone in the registry can start tagging it, so we can build up those, those taxonomies and those folksonomies and things like that, so that, we can start to build up a bit of a better understanding of data, so that users can kind of control that. What I'm going to do in a second is when we start clicking through, I'll show you how to add things to collections. So we've added a new way for that to happen as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save it and go back and start the rest of my demo. So a little bit of a collections refresh. I think we had a couple of really big pieces of feedback around that, looking for some quality of life improvement. So we've delivered 2 thumbs up. Hopefully that's a big improvement. And if you're one of the people who is using collections quite extensively, let us know if you've got feedback either through the chat here or on our community forums as well. So now that we've done that, we're going to jump into the big meat and gravy of today's kind of presentation, and that's looking at this data lineage work. So to do that, I'm going to look at my executive data systems collection. So this is a data set that I've set up that holds together a number of dashboards, right? So really common thing to see is we've got two dashboards in here. So I've got my executive data systems data set set up. And in Aristotle, we have 2 layers to our data sets. We have our data sets and our distributions. So data set is a big collection of stuff, and a distribution might be an individual dashboard. It could be an individual table in a database, or a table in a data lake, or a data warehouse, or all sorts of data. So it's basically just building a little bit of a hierarchy between our managed content and then those components within it. But as you can see, I haven't got any spatial information against this, and we'll look at some examples later. But what I wanted to show is, first of all, we're introducing some more dynamicness. So it's collapsed my distributions down, but I can start to see the breakdown of everything in it. So my sales performance dashboard actually has a little bit more information in there. So it's about my staff members, it's got sales over time, average time to close. So we can think of this in the case of, for a lot of us, it's things about, how long do service events take? And that could be in the public sector or in the banking sector, the finance sector, sales. It's basically starting to track how long does it take for me to deliver value back to my clients. You'll also notice, like, this isn't mandatory. We don't have to tag everything in here. We can just tag that a dashboard exists. Doesn't give us a lot of value, but we've got both of those examples. So I'm going to collapse that one down. We're just going to focus on our sales performance dashboard, and we're also going to focus on our provenance. So we've taken this, again, really pre-existing standard stuff. We've taken it from the ISO standards that Aristotle's built on. We've looked at things like data.gov.au and DCAT and data cataloging standards and said we want to bring a little bit of that in. So if you're a previous user of Aristotle, you may be familiar with this. And what it's showing is that data set level. How are my data systems kind of evolving over time? Where do they come from? So you can see here I've got 3 major inputs into my data set. That's my payments data, my manufacturing data, and my HR data. So again, really, really common stuff. So what I want to kind of jump to here is, first of all, I want to jump in, and now that I've seen what my data set's made of, I've got some dashboards, I've got some source data sources. I want to dig into this dashboard a little bit more and show you what that looks like in depth. So if I open that up, what you'll see is, again, I'm starting to see where it comes from. It's contained in a data area. And this is also, so this is the first new thing that we want to show, is we're now adding provenance data at that distribution level. So previously we're just operating for the data sets. Now we're doing it at a table level as well. So not only are we tracking how does data change from database to database, it's tracking from table to table. And we'll look at field to field in a second as well. So as you can see here, I've started to track all of this information together, and it's helping me understand a little bit more. So I can see there's ETL processes, but again, still not very visual. So what I want to do here is I'm going to jump back to my data system and go, we're going to jump out of traditional Aristotle, and we're going to showcase one of our, actually, sorry, there's one thing on my checklist I wanted to do. So I'm back in my sales performance. You might have noticed that this wasn't included in that collection. The one thing that I wanted to quickly show for our existing clients is we've now got this add collections button that allows us to tag these if they're contained anywhere. So as you can see, we haven't got this in any collections across the registry. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add it, and you can see it's expanded that taxonomy out, and I can just go, this is part of my sales dashboards. Really straightforward. I don't need to go into it. I don't need to own it. I can save it and now it's saved, and I can go back and I can see that it's contained in my sales collection. So again, if I was to browse there, what we should see is we can see that it's now part of the sales dashboard area as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump back to my sales performance dashboard, and I'm going to jump back up one layer again to my executive data systems. If you're lost at this point, it's completely understandable, right? This is a really text-heavy system that's allowed me to kind of manage this. I've recorded a lot of this today. I've dropped it in. But if I'm unfamiliar to this system, I need a way to track it. I need a way to see it and understand it. And spoiler alert, we've actually got that. So that graphic that we showed earlier, we're actually able to produce from Aristotle. And we'll show how that was done. But from my executive data systems kind of data set, I can go to my graphs, and we've added this new one. This will be going live probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We're still just ironing out some testing. And if I go in there, it's now showing me my entire layout across the system. So it's showing me all of the incoming data sources. I'm just going to move these around so it's a little easier to see. So that's a little easier. So we can see I've got my executive data systems. I've got my manufacturing data systems here. My payments data is coming in, and my HR data is coming in. One other thing to note is that you'll see that it's actually trying to show me that there's more coming through. And if I scroll back down, it showed me that my HR systems are coming from my enterprise data warehouse. And this is showing me that there's other data being generated from the data warehouse. So if I click that, I can now see a pretty holistic overview of the data in my registry. So we're going beyond text now. And what we're looking at here is the ability for us to track. I'm just going to move these around. Again, one of the challenges with doing these directed graphs is actually getting everything to look nice. And we're still working on that. But as you can see now, what we've got is we've got a lot of this data coming in. We can see our payments data is coming into our executive dashboards. We can see, all the fields being generated. We can see staff time tracking being used to generate our sales dashboards. So we're now starting to get an overview at a data set level, at a table level, and in a second we'll see at a field level how this is all kind of feeding into one view of the data in the registry. So to do that, we're going to show some of the interactive components. So as you can see, this is kind of collapsed down, and I've got these two options. So first of all, I'm going to hide any of these paths, any of these columns that don't have a link. So it's collapsed it down, so it's a little bit easier for me to digest. Again, okay, this is a little nicer. And now what I want to do is I want to expand some of these links. So as we can see, just by expanding that out, I can see that the order del, which I'll get into in a second. So these two fields are being used to generate average time to close. And what I can do is if I jump back to my popovers, so hard as well. So if I jump back to my sales performance dashboard, what I'll start to see here is, again, the same kind of information coming through. So I can see where this data is coming from as well. So what I can now see is I can see that my order tracking, my staff time tracking, and what all of these columns mean. So I can see average time to close is exactly what I thought. So it's the average time that a client or that a staff member takes to execute a sales contract. So I've got my data dictionary, I've got my visualization, and I've got all of my provenance being recorded through Aristotle in a way that's relatively easy to digest now. So I think this is a really big improvement on what we've done previously to allow us to basically to capture that. The other thing that I want to look at just really quickly is I want to show how this was done, right? So traditionally, and I think this is where Aristotle is going to differ from a lot of data systems, is traditionally we'd look at this and we'd try and click on the graph and we'd try and add links and try and manage it in that way. And I think that works in a traditional data modeling sense, but in Aristotle, we're trying to encourage this idea of democratization, so getting everybody involved. And what that generally means is the people who are producing my dashboards will have no clue about the data warehouse itself, because again, we're seeing this chain of events that's being used to link from a source data system all the way up to a dashboard. So what do? Well, we treat every system individually. So if I expand these out, you'll start to notice that I've got this staff member ID and I've got a salesperson ID in these two tables, and they aren't linked. So my job for the rest of this session is I'm going to pretend I'm just working on the sales performance dashboard. I don't know about everything else. All I need to understand is my role managing this one dashboard, this one visualization. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to that dashboard. I'm going to open the editor. So as you can see, I have the permission, I have the controls to edit this. I'm going to open the editor, and I'm going to go and find that provenance information. So for those of you who have Aristotle's, this is under the components in our distributions. I'm going to scroll down, and I can see provenance information for the tables, and then also for all of the columns. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to say this staff member ID that I'm using to generate from my sales data, my payments data, I'm actually going to bring in that salesperson ID as well. So if I bring that in and save that, Teams is in the way, save those changes, what I'll start to see is if I go back to my graph and refresh everything, once I expand it out, I can see that link has been made. So I don't need to know everything about the data model. I don't need to know the original sources for that. All I needed to do was I needed to edit the one data set that I'm in control of. The one thing that I'm managing, I'm able to edit, go to the components, and then change any of that lineage back. So we do that on a source basis. So I say, like, if I've got a data system, I may not know where it's going to, but I know where it's been generated from. So everything's about looking back. If I'm making this data system, my responsibility then becomes to say, where did I get it from? Where's this data come from? And what is the existence of that? The role of Aristotle is then to find all of those linkages across the system. So what it does now is it then goes, well, I'm going to find you all of that information. I'm going to link all of that together in a way that I can start producing these visualizations in a way that makes sense. The other thing to note here is, and I'm just going to shuffle a couple of these around, is it also allows us to track complex ETL processes as well, without the user having to understand how that's happening. So as we can see here, part of this transformation is the ability for us to join our existing order tracking and our staff time tracking. So if I was to select this link, I can see how both of those tables are being brought together to feed into that data source. To feed into that new database. And I can see that when I look at my sales performance dashboard, I can see how these have been linked together. So my orders and my staff time are separate to my payments data. So what that gives me, and I'm going to close off here because I think we've covered kind of everything. So we've got the ability to add new links and new references between our data sources. What it's basically allowed me to do is, even though I'm only editing one kind of system, it allows me to follow that chain all the way through. The really good news is we're about probably 2 to 3 weeks from release on this one, so it's going to be coming out really soon. And I think we're already working on a couple of example use cases with a handful of clients who are here today. So if we're doing any data lineage work with you at the moment, there's a very good chance that you're going to see these in the near future as well, based on some migrations that we'll be doing for some of our clients. So we've done that. Just doing my little checklist. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about today is for those of you who are new to Aristotle, who are familiar with Aristotle, you may have noticed that our distributions, our tables of information are now have a new tab. So this tab is called Summary Statistics. And for those of you without a statistical background, it's probably easier to just click and show. So this one's live at the moment. So this is one you don't have to wait for. And I'll show you how to configure these in a minute. But basically, a summary statistic is a way for us to understand a particular field of data in a collection. So it's not about getting all of the data in. It's about getting key information about parts of that data so that we can build an additional understanding. One of the challenges with data and metadata is it is a bit of a grey line, and this one looks like data, but it's kind of not. It's information that helps us understand that particular field. So for example, if I was looking at my sales performance dashboard, what I have here is I have my total sales per month, and I know from reading about it, I'm just going to go back. This is my dashboard for tracking sales performance, and I should have also put in there comma for every individual who's making sales at Ninja Widgets Incorporated. But what I can see here is that in this table, the minimum value of sales per month is down at 0. The maximum is up at 73. So there's somebody in this organization who's hitting that maximum target of making 73 sales a month. That's probably pretty good for this organization, and they're exceeding well above the average. So without getting access to this data itself, these summary statistics give me a little bit of an understanding about what's in there. This is really useful for data requests, and if you've seen any of our presentations on Tableau Data Portal, it's really useful for helping people understand what data is in there. We've actually got a couple of import formats for that. Now, I won't go through 100% of that, but we'll be releasing help on that soon. But basically what we can do is we can start importing either through the user interface or through the API, the ability for us to profile data and track these summary statistics. You also notice from a user perspective, they can actually control this as well. So they can change what they see. So you can have multiple, like large numbers of summary statistics across the organization, tracking minimum values, maximum values, box plots, date time durations, common codes, frequency tables, all sorts of stuff without limitations. And I'll show that in a second. But basically what it allows us to do is, track all of that metadata about those individual rows in those data sets in a nice structured way. For those of you who are clients, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you again. It's actually really easy to enable this. So all you need to do is speak to your administrator. There's two things that need to be done. If you're an administrator already, you just need to go to the dashboard, view your registry settings, and then we've added our first profile in here that we're looking at for the rest of the year. So we're adding a bunch of new data features. And one of those is that summary statistics profile. So once this is enabled, what you'll notice now is under the administrator tools, we now have the ability to manage these summary statistic types. So these aren't pre-configured. The idea is that we were working with a couple of clients who had their own different tracking information they wanted to record. So I can add in a new one and go standard deviation. So now, and I'm not going to type the definition in there. I'm just going to create it. Now I'm starting to get that ability to control what data or what metadata I'm holding about these data sets in my organization. So again, what Aristotle's designed to do is it's designed to give an understanding of the data that's held in these disparate data sets. So if I was to go back to my graph and find my sales performance dashboard, what I'd be able to do is I'd be able to know I'm under this executive area. From my dashboard, I can see my summary statistics, and you can see I've got this new option now. So I've now got this new option that I can control, and that's all able to be edited through the interface as well. So if I was to open my item editor again, I go to my components, I scroll down, and I'll now have this new option to start entering a table of summary statistics. So again, this isn't going to make sense for my staff member ID, but I might go and I'm going to make this up, come up with some really bad numbers, but I might say my standard deviation is like 6.5. My standard deviation for sales per quarter, that looks like it could be about 20. And the average time to close, looking at 1.5 days standard deviation. So what I can see here is, again, looking at my summary statistics, for those of you with a data background, I can see that there's some really high performers in here. There's somebody who's absolutely smashing their sales targets. So I know that there's something interesting going on in this data without necessarily needing to get that, that unit record information. So this is, again, really useful, really powerful for data requests, really powerful for people who are trying to understand what data exists in the ecosystem and how they can use it. And then, so that's done our summary statistics. We've done our collections. And then lastly, probably this is a really big impact that has a really small kind of visualization kind of design. What I'm looking at here is the ability for me to go back to my item. And I'm going to search for my Australian data set. So I'm actually interested in data set. There we go. Australian widget sales database. So this is one that we've tagged previously with some geospatial data. What I'm going to do is basically, I'm just going to jump in. I'm not going to hold this back. So as you can see, we've started to incorporate geospatial information into Aristotle as well. So for those of you who are familiar with this, a bounding box is a way for us to document where data exists, on the globe. It helps us narrow down at a really high level what the coverage of this data is. So what we're able to do is well, draw a box. Punchline. It allows us to draw a box that outlines where data is being captured. So what we've done again is for this data set, I've got my Australian, my geospatially tagged data for the Australian sales region. And we're starting to use that ANZLIC profile, that 19115.1 kind of information, so that I can capture a bounding box not only for a data set, but also for these distributions as well. So what I can see is this data set contains, three different bounding box areas. I've got information on the New South Wales area, information from Western Australia, and then information covering the entirety of Australia. What we're looking at doing, what I can't show now because it's not super finished yet, actually we can give it a shot. What we're looking at doing is adding the ability for us to then do geospatial searches as well. So being able to visually draw on a map, the ability for us to draw this square, go from corner to corner, and then bring that in so that we can find information. We are already, if you're a power user of Aristotle, you're probably familiar with this kind of work. But if you're not, I'll show you. This is pretty cool. So we're actually adding in some search tokens that allow us to do this as well. And I'm probably going to get this wrong unless somebody corrects me in the chat. But what we can do is we can actually search via a bounding box as well. What that allows us to do is enter the geospatial coordinates from the minimum latitude, the minimum longitude, all the way up. So it's not quite drawing on a map yet, but we've got all the back end there. And then as we do, we've got a search activity on the roadmap where we're going to be rebuilding our search. What it allows us to do is, hopefully this works, search via that bounding box. Now, let me try that again. No.
Flip your positives and negatives.
Maybe this. Thank you.
No. Like it should be minus 33, I would have thought, and then positive 118 if that's Australia.
No, I'm not going for Australia. I'm actually going.
Oh, okay, sorry.
This works. We'll try it again one last time. Perfect. Okay. This is pretty funny. So we actually put one in, so we can actually search via bounding boxes as well. What this bounding box is some data about a fun place. I actually asked the team if we had to do a fun example, what's a great example that we could do? Where's somewhere fun? And they've picked, well, Los Angeles. And if we zoom all the way in, this bounding box actually covers Disneyland almost perfectly, right? Not sure why all the streets are so perfectly aligned around there, but it allows us to capture that. So what we've been able to do is do a bounding box search purely based on those tokens. We're going to be adding some really cool graphical tools around that as well. But what it does is it allows us to filter down on a geospatial level as well. So geospatial search and geospatial tagging, we're slowly rolling out to new users or to new and existing users. It's not available for everybody yet. We're still figuring out how we're going to be building that into the product and how it's going to be accessible. But if you're really, really interested, now's the time to get in contact with us. So if you're an existing Aristotle client, speak with your account manager and we can work through getting this turned on, because it's pretty neat. Even if you're not in Australia or Disneyland, we've got the ability for us to capture that at a data set level, at a distribution level, to help people do those searches. And then now I think I'm just going to review my slides. But I think that's pretty much it. I think we're done. So we've done our collections refresh. We've done our understanding of the summary statistics. We've done our data lineage, and we've done our geospatial metadata. So I'll just bring those back up again. So here we go. Here's what we said we were going to run through. There we go. So we've run through all of those, and we've done it in pretty good time. So I guess like the next point to go to is Q&A. So I'm going to hand it over to you all who are interested in probably some of this stuff, and open for questions. If there's anything that you want to see in depth from today's presentation, we can run through that. If there's any other examples you'd like us to run through, now's a really good time to ask. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'm going to open the floor to questions from everybody online. And I think it sounds like people can.
Hey, Sam, there's some questions in the chat as well, just to let you know.
All right, let's have a look at some of those. So, growing back up. So, I'm going to work through these as we go. So, Michael, who's a pretty big fan of Aristotle, and I've got a hand up. Well, Lauren, can you let me know who's got their hand up in a second as well? So Michael's asked about ETA fields and API integration. Yes. So the short answer to that is yes. All of that data lineage kind of information, all those ETL links are able to be done through the API. And that's all documented through our Swagger documentation. So if you're a big API fan, you'll be able to start documenting all that in. I know some people have done this manually themselves. So if you've done that and you're looking at doing transformations, yes, all of that can be done. Once you've started that, all of the graphs will get picked up from that as well. Or if people just start doing it manually, that'll get fed into the graphs as well. Kia is asking, can these statistics be integrated and fed into other systems? Yeah, again, yes. So our API works. That's a nice two-part question from Michael and Kia. So yes, so all of the information in Aristotle can go in through the API and come out through the API. I think that the benefit there for Kia is, yes, you can kind of pull a lot of those summary statistics out, that data lineage and those data definitions out into tools like Power BI to give people that additional information. So we've had some other clients who've worked with the Power Apps platform to use the API and pull content out. Yeah, and we've got a lot of capability for things like that. So yes, absolutely API support. I'm just going to work through a couple of these online ones, and then I'll throw to Irina, who's got her hand up, and then one other person. Question from Paul Wilson. I think like I stalked you online on LinkedIn. I think that's Paul Wilson, who I used to work with like decades ago, which is so cool. Can you handle bounding boxes that are not regular? Yes. So the bounding boxes are designed to be purely geospatial coordinates. So we're not going down to the polygon level. We're not going down to like state boundaries. I think there's really good geospatial tools out there. We're not in the kind of field of trying to overtake that geospatial kind of component. What I've found is that bounding boxes are a really good midway point between traditional kind of data lineage and data cataloging systems like Aristotle and our really hardcore geospatial GIS kind of systems. So it's just purely bounding boxes, purely lat long, like 2 quarters of a square to help filter down data through Aristotle. Michael has another one. Are those calculations of those statistics uploaded? So yeah, so they'd have to be calculated from the source data. So Aristotle, for those of you who know, never touches those source data systems. It's purely like a catalog that people can kind of document and update. So what it is it's all fed through the API. So if you're calculating those statistics externally, you can feed them in. One other thing that I didn't show is those statistics have permissions on them as well. So they're not necessarily available to everybody. You can actually control who can see those because those also have sensitive information in. Then lastly, for Andrew's asked a date that it was last updated. Yes, actually, that would be pretty cool. I think that would be really important. In the immediate term, if you're interested in using it, you could probably add your own column, like a last updated summary statistic column. And then that would allow you to track that as well if you're profiling that in. And now and I think Irina had her hand up as well.
Yes, I do. Thanks, Sam. This is Irina Bastrako from Geoscience Australia. So it's really good to see that you're moving towards geospatial sort of discovery capability with Aristotle. But from my perspective, there is quite a big difference between discovery and actually recording some other elements about geospatial. And they're not necessarily for visualization, but definitely for finding and data integration, like further down the line. So are you planning to provide more like elements to record for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like I think geospatial is an area that's got a really good complexity of how they manage this. We are looking at bringing in some additional fields to support that geospatial kind of profile that we're building out. So that's looking at time boundaries of when data was collected in a really granular way, looking at where it was collected. I think one thing that's a really high importance is understanding like the profile, like the geo coordinate profiles that some of these are using as well. So we're trying to match as closely to ANZLIC, which is the Australian New Zealand locations and something.
Spatial Information Council.
Thank you. Spatial Information Council. They're standards that are, again, closely aligned with the international ones as well. So we're looking at ways to support the Australian profiles and the international profiles for that. And any fields that don't exist in Aristotle will be mimicking from ANZIC.
Okay.
So, thank you very much. Any other? I don't know. Like I'm basically this is all the end of my day, so I'm here to be grilled by anybody who wants to learn about Aristotle. I'll probably I think we've gone through the main presentation for those. So for those of you who wanted to see all the new features, I'm not going to talk through anything new. I think the aim for the next 15 minutes of this presentation is just to do that Q&A. I haven't had a chance to do a one-on-one with the users for a while, so I don't know. I'm here to be grilled. I see a lot of familiar names. I see a couple of new names as well. So yeah, feel free to ask any big questions you'd like.
Another collections question. When you have say you're tagging data sets in a collection.
Yep.
And say your data set has maybe half a dozen distributions in it as part of that data set. If you look in those distributions, will it tell you that they're part of a collection because their parent is in a collection, or will you have to tag them individually as well if you want them all to be kind of grouped?
In that case, you'd probably have to tag them individually. But we are looking at ways to speed up the bulk tagging of things through the collections as well.
Yeah.
I will take that one on notice and I'll see what we can do. Probably in this instance, you'd probably have to tag them all, but we could probably add an option into the data sets. Yeah,
cool. Thanks.
And I saw Andrew asked a question as well. Will the instance be available? We are actually, once the feature goes live, we've got our own aristotle.cloud registry that we make available for anybody to try and to use for their own kind of SaaS production kind of stuff. We'll be putting an example up there, Andrew. So we'll be putting up all the examples we saw today. Once that's available, we'll be putting it online, which actually helps me raise a really interesting point. Is when we were looking at it, and I'm just going to jump back one slide. Maybe I'll put my face up here as well. There we go. Just going to jump back to this slide. We saw that there was probably the one question that I'd like to throw back to everybody who's watching today is the data lineage is we've kind of kept it into that graphing area, whereas the maps we've brought across. Do we prefer having the graphs separate and in that separate space, or would people want to see some of that lineage information on that homepage for those data sets? Throw me what are our reactions? a thumbs up or a wow, I guess. So a thumbs up if you think it'd be a good idea for us to have it on the home, like on the item page, or like a wow if you'd prefer not to have it kind of crufting up the thing. We'll also probably run a poll on this one as well. We'll probably run a poll on the Aristotle community. So if there's anybody that you think will have some really good feedback on this as well, we're really trying to, this is a big change, like this is a really big addition for us. So we'll pop a poll on the forums once we get this recorded and get this on YouTube so that people can review it. And if you want to provide your feedback, you can do that there. I think I saw a couple of people typing. If you want, you can unmute as well. It will get messy quite fast as more data happens. Yeah, you've got a good point there, Kia, and that's why we were hesitant on it. There's probably options we can do around that, but that's probably a really good point. I guess like maybe throw a thumbs up on Kia's remark if you agree with him in the chat. Otherwise, yeah, thank you for your feedback. No. Well, we're about 2 minutes away from 20 past 4. What I'm going to do is I'll keep this open for a few more minutes. Like I said, I'm here to answer questions or I'm here to show examples if people want to see anything in particular. We're looking at running another one of these next month, either probably on data lineage or probably on some new data search that we're going to be building in the next couple of weeks. So we'll send out notifications through the mailing list to everybody who's signed up. We'll probably add a couple of you to the mailing list as well. As I said, this is going to be going live in the next couple of weeks as well. Based on the feedback today, it seems like everybody's generally pretty glad with this. We'll probably we're going to make a conservative decision on how we kind of add this into the system. Yeah, I think I'm calling it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it here. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Really appreciate everybody coming. I think it's really good to get this feedback. It's really good to see people coming along as well. It kind of shows the impact that we're having. It's nice to have people to present with and present to. And thank you very much for all of your questions. As I said, we'll be capturing the screen recording of everything except for other people's questions so that you can remain anonymous if you so choose. But what we'll be doing is we'll be releasing this so you can share it with your colleagues. We're putting it on community.aristotlemetadata.com so that you can kind of review it there and you can make any comments that you've got there, and we'll be putting some screenshots in. I see one more typing from Ramantha, but we'll pop it onto the community there. And if there's any follow-up questions, please reach out to Sam at Aristotle and you'll get me, or if you'd like to go to the whole team, if you'd like a faster response, hello@aristotlemetadata.com is equally useful, and we'll follow on from there. Nothing from Ramantha. Okay, cool. In that case, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for listening to me present. Looking forward to seeing all the great graphics that people are going to be doing with these tools, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming and attending. Bye.